Greetings, I'm Laura Puccia Valtorta. Welcome to a new episode of my short story podcast, B is for Bisexual, Season 3, Episode 7, a story entitled Disobedience, because Disobedience is my middle name. We have some semi-familiar characters in this story. These people were also part of last month's story, The Arborists. Reading with me today are my son Dante.
Greetings.
And my husband Marco.
Buongiorno.
I am an attorney and a content creator. My films include Bermuda, Disability, and the Disease Detective series, all available on Amazon and the Tubi channel, also the Fossum channel. My latest film is AI in the Family, also available on Fossum and on the Stash YouTube channel. And shortly, we're going to be having Zoom Hit, which is a narrative feature. A shout out to listeners in Frankfurt, Los Angeles, England, South Carolina, and Virginia. Dear listener, we live in perilous, disgusting times, but hang in there and please stay safe. Lavinia was able to escape from the Alabama prison Etowah in mid-May because her friend Celedine had helped her by hiding a taser behind a tree near the parking lot and sneaking her through the conveyor belt inspection point with a fake pass. Celedine had to remain working at Etowah for 2 more weeks until her children, the twins, graduated from high school. She was Lavinia's best friend.
Hide at Marge's.
Celedine had written to her and squeezed mustard on a piece of white bread in the cafeteria. Lavinia already knew, unfortunately, that her own house had been burned to the ground and her motorcycle stolen. The hogs were a big loss. She and Celedine had bonded over motorcycle trips to Lake Martin and Birmingham. All the good things were gone in the U.S. Writing for the local newspaper had been the best job Lavinia ever had. Despite the Bugle's penchant for covering high school team sports and county fair craft contests, it also dedicated a fair amount of space to educational issues, the crazy quilt of Southern history, and important protest marches, banned books. The Bugle always sponsored a $1,000 prize for Artist of the Year, and the category Artist always included writers, performance artists, and filmmakers, as well as the usual painters and sculptors. Wilbur Johnson, the publisher and editor, had been a fair, open-minded man, but when he died, the Bugle imploded. Lavinia recalled with horror Wilbur's funeral and the greedy glint in the eyes of the second son, city editor Saren Johnson, whom the board had hired to take over. Saren was a lazy ass and a patriarch. It was pretty obvious he would not allow Lavinia to report on, say, women's rights anymore. Saren had said, "Men have rights too," as though Lavinia did not already appreciate that too much. She had spent her whole life fighting men's crusades to ruin the environment and waste women's time. No more. She exited the newspaper job and started a new adventure. Her podcast, Queen Lavinia, was a joy to write and produce. Each episode got hundreds of listeners. Then her audience increased to thousands worldwide. Her final story on the podcast was an exhortation, really, for schools to teach history and her story, their story, all the brutal history of the world and the United States, including the migrations of people from Africa, Asia, Europe, and the plague of slavery that spread from the world to Europe and the United States, destroying people's lives, the oppression of women everywhere, the fight for the right to vote. All of these things and more needed to be taught in the public schools. And no more book banning, no more boxes or categories to check. One humanity. She was arrested soon after. Fearful after this development, Oliver and Peebles had quickly driven away to Mexico, to Oaxaca, to set up a life for them all, leaving Celedine behind for a semester so the twins, Honey and Bunny, could finish their senior year in the narrow-minded school. The twins hoped for university in Mexico. Oliver and Peebles, the arborists, went down to find jobs and a homestead for them all. Maybe some Mexican trees needed tending to. Celedine, Honey, and Bunny all wanted Lavinia to come along, and Peebles' mother, Marge. Marge could not decide whether to leave Alabama. Her house was still there. After escaping Etowah, Lavinia took Celedine's advice, headed to Marge's, and hid in Peebles' apartment over the garage. It was modern and clean because Peebles had designed it that way. It was solidly built because Oliver had built it for his friend and lover. Lavinia sat lounging, her feet crossed atop the ottoman, making a bouquet of freshly showered toes. Prison had been horrible. Nothing to read. No radio or television. No outside yard even. 3 months of mushy food and despair. But there was a sort of camaraderie among the detainees. Nobody inside had done anything destructive or violent on the outside, aside from expressing an opinion. It was the leaders of the United States who were stupid, not the citizens. Climate change was baking everybody's brain. Celedine had whispered to her in the cafeteria, in Mexico they're using solar panels and everybody has a big water filter and a vegetable garden. No speech crackdowns. Not fancy, but at least free. Lavinia looked at the purple phone Celedine had left for her, a beginner's book on Spanish. She wanted to call and let Celedine know she had made it, but Cel's shift didn't end until 6 p.m. Well, maybe Marge was at home. She crept downstairs through the garage and slid into Marge's house through the back door. Marge was in the kitchen baking strawberry pies. When she heard Lavinia, she yelped and turned around.
Oh my God, I've been worried about you. How do you get out?
Celedine, said Lavinia. She got me a taser and a day pass.
You can't stay here long,
said Marge.
Not downstairs in this part of the house. Them pies are for the police.
Oh, when do they usually show up? Said Lavinia.
Whenever they're hungry.
Since most of the nation's vegetable pickers have been arrested and deported, people relied more and more on what they could grow in their own gardens. Marge had always been a handy gardener. She had a big yard and a pecan shade tree. Her rototiller was rigged with a battery and a solar panel.
Bobert is asleep in the guest bedroom,
she told Lavinia.
Got nowhere else to go. Her kids took off for Canada.
Oh, can she make it to Mexico with us? Said Lavinia.
I don't know. I really hope so,
moaned Marge. She ran her fingers along the veins in the red marble countertop.
She's my best friend. She's fat and lazy as a toad, but she's my best friend. We were in the Girl Rangers together. We both wanted to work for the Forest Service. That didn't happen.
You know, I'm starving, said Lavinia. She pointed at the pies.
Hey, what's going on?
Bobert padded out from the guest bedroom wearing a peach terry cloth robe and huge tin can curlers in her raspy dyed blonde hair.
We're planning our move to Mexico,
said Marge, rushing over to hug Bobert.
Glad to see you finally got up.
Yeah, this old carcass is on the move.
Said Bobert.
Because it's lunchtime, the best part of the day.
Standing next to each other, the two women looked like ebony and ivory dolls, with Bobert's pink complexion and Marge's coffee-colored one. The women's attitudes somehow complemented one another, with Marge large and in charge, and Bobert always ready for fun. Marge cut a piece of pie for Bobert and one for herself and one for Lavinia. They sat down at the kitchen counter.
I'm ready for Mexico,
said Bobert.
I've decided Canada would be too cold.
You mean full of wildfires, said Lavinia.
Not enough black people in Mexico.
Said Marge. Lavinia pondered this. I personally have never been to Mexico, but I hear the population is pretty evenly divided among the Asian tribes that came over 15,000 years ago and the Europeans who came over starting in the 1500s. It's true, not a lot of African people,
Grumph.
said Marge.
No, you'll survive.
Said Bobert.
Start yourself a nice garden. Peebles' last letter said they had a herd of goats. I love me some goats.
They stink.
Said Marge.
I can make sure they stay outside.
Said Bobert.
We need to get ourselves a donkey, too.
That's the three of us. Celedine and the kids, Peebles and Oliver. That makes 8 people. Is there enough room for all of us? Lavinia was worried.
People said they found themselves a piece of land. Got one house on it with 4 bedrooms. They're converting a barn to make 4 more bedrooms. The goats get to stay outside in a lean-to.
Sheesh, said Lavinia. What about work? I myself plan to continue making my podcast,
Well, Oliver's doing plumbing.
said Bobert.
And Peebles is studying the history of cochineal bugs so he can give walking tours of the city. We've all got to find work. I plan to weave some rugs and sell them, pretend I'm Mexican.
Lavinia looked at Bobert's bulbous figure and pasty skin. I guess you could come across as Spanish or one of the English colonists.
As long as I keep my mouth shut.
Marge cut herself another slice of pie.
I don't want to get the job. I've got my pension. If I move there, Peebles will have to support me just like I supported him most of his life. Because of him, I couldn't work for the Forest Service.
You could have,
Said Bobert.
if you'd have let me do the babysitting.
No, you had that job as a janitor.
Said Marge.
And you were married to Todd.
The front doorbell rang and everybody fell silent. Marge pointed toward the bathroom and Lavinia hurried in that direction, taking a plateful of pie with her. Bobert was not far behind. What are you doing? Said Lavinia. You're not wanted by the police,
I have to poop,
said Bobert.
and I ain't climbing those stairs.
Do-do-do-do. After the police left, Lavinia and Bobert waited for 5 minutes with the fan on full blast before exiting the bathroom. Marge was in the kitchen, pacing back and forth.
I've got it figured.
She said to Lavinia.
You need to call Slim and get him over here for a meeting. Them cops were carrying machine guns this time. And handcuffs. They're hunting for Bear. And you're the bear.
Slim Tedesco was Lavinia's attorney and a well-known First Amendment advocate. You call him, please, said Lavinia. I don't dare telephone his office. Marge asked Slim to come over for a meeting that night after his office hours were open. Yes, ma'am, sounded loudly over the phone.
I wish he wouldn't call me ma'am,
said Marge. That night, after a delicious meal of lentil soup, salad, and homemade bread, Lavinia, Marge, and Bobert waited for Slim to arrive. Oh, thank you for that wonderful food, said Lavinia. We were lucky to get frozen French fries in prison. No fresh vegetables,
Marge is a damn good cook.
said Bobert. Slim walked in quickly without ringing the bell. He looked tired and scared. We don't have a judicial system anymore, he lamented, sitting next to Marge on the couch. I was in court today. It's all crazy. The judge wasn't even a lawyer. He was a former dog trader. That's what we are to this country, said Lavinia. Dogs. Lavinia took the third seat on the couch next to Slim. As you can see, I've escaped from prison and I don't want to go back. When Honey and Bunny finish school, Celedine and I are heading for Mexico. She handed Slim the address. This is where Oliver and Peebles are living now. That's where I'll be going. If you get into some kind of trouble because of me, just give Peebles a call. I'll get myself back here. Slim stared at the piece of paper. I doubt they'd be worried about a free speech criminal who's escaped to Mexico, and I very much doubt Mexico will care about your stance on teaching real history and on not banning books.
That's what I told her,
said Bobert.
Etowah's got enough prisoners,
said Marge. When the police come around, hide in the garage or one of the car trunks, said Slim. They told me, these idiots actually told me to my face, that they planned to inspect Marge's house every day at noon 30. They wanted me to know the schedule.
They were sending you a message,
said Marge.
We can invite them in real polite. Talk dumb, eat lunch after they leave,
said Bobert. You got it, said Slim. I don't think they actually care about catching Miss Lavinia. They're just following orders. Marge put her head in her hands.
I'm worried about my property,
she told Slim.
If I move to Mexico to help Peebles, what about my garden, my trees, my house? I don't want my beautiful house to slide into ruination.
Slim looked around. How many bedrooms you got?
3 in this house,
said Marge,
and the fancy apartment over the garage.
Tracy and I have been looking for a new place, said Slim. We've got 2 teenagers and they are running wild and driving us crazy. Lavinia tried to imagine Slim having wild children. He was a gentle, willowy person.
Rent this place for a year,
said Marge.
Put the kids in the house, live with your wife in the fancy apartment.
Maybe, said Slim. My brother Chub is out of work. He could stay at my place while he's learning to keep his mouth shut. Chub was a letter carrier. He got too talkative with the customers, demanded a new sorting machine at the war office, and bought a bunch of controversial Betty White stamps for his collection. Lavinia nodded. I have those Betty White stamps too. I had them, but they burned down when the feds destroyed my house. We could try this out, said Slim. Just 1 more year to survive before my oldest goes off to U Birmingham. Let me draw up a rental contract.
Be sure to put in a damages clause,
said Marge. Doo-doo-doo-doo. For 1 week and 6 days, Lavinia hid in the apartment over the garage. During the morning, she watched television and studied Spanish. Necesito una camisa. Agua, por favor. Mi esposa se llama Celedine. Oliver might object to that last one, but in the end, they all had to live together. After the police left every day around 1:45 p.m., Bobert brought up the food, usually very good food, such as homemade pies and salads, an occasional peanut butter sandwich. Lavinia ate with gusto and then went outside to tend to the garden, picking and weeding. She wore a big hat and stayed close to the garage. Marge's yard was a peaceful sanctuary. On the last day of May, they all met in Marge's living room at 9 a.m. Celedine brought the twin girls, Honey and Bunny, who were tall and tea-colored with a round afro, Honey, and short braids, Bunny. The girls were bouncing around and raring to get on the road. Celedine gave Lavinia a long, relieved hug. They hadn't seen each other since the big escape.
At Etowah, they aren't even asking where you went. I think one of the lunch ladies read my mustard message, and so everybody assumes you're okay. You got away.
You were so right to take that security job, said Lavinia. Good pay and a good strategy.
Oh, it was so good to get away,
said Celedine. Honey was practicing her Spanish phrases.
Tus pies huelen mal,
she told Bunny, holding her nose. They were fighting over which seats they would get in Celedine's van. They had brought only 1 suitcase per person and rented the corrugated metal house out to a neighbor with a big boat. The main house had been sold 6 months prior to fund the new settlement in Mexico. Everybody was ready to go. Only Marge looked skeptical. Wearing her scrappiest garden clothes and a baseball cap, she was prepared to get on the road and take the first driving shift, only she wasn't happy. Bobert took the passenger seat, and Lavinia sat behind her with Celedine. Honey and Bunny were yucking it up in the back with obnoxious Spanish.
Eres gordo y fea.
Said Bunny, interrupted into laughter.
What's the word for donkey?
Said Bobert. Marge sat at the steering wheel looking wilted.
We've got to wait for Slim,
she said.
The cops will be here soon. Not a good time to be late.
Around 9:30, Slim arrived with his wife and 2 tattooed sons. The boys were carrying a guitar case and a plastic bag full of sneakers. Slim and Tracy looked very small next to their children. Honey and Bunny stared out the window of the van and for a moment looked regretful about leaving.
Oh, ellos son guapos,
said Honey. Marge stepped out of the van and exchanged signed rental contracts with Slim. Both of them looked scared. Marge handed Slim a set of keys and they hugged one another. Good luck to you all, said Slim. I'm going to miss you.
Chance we might be back soon,
said Bobert.
We'll give it 6 months.
Marge revved up the van and they drove slowly down the driveway. Everybody was silent except Marge, who couldn't contain her crying and her sobbing. The end. Everybody, thank you for listening, and we will see you next month. Hang in there.
Arrivederci.
See you next month.
Ciao.